All right, welcome back. More Hollow Knight. This is episode 12, getting underway. And last episode, we had left off having acquired the final upgrade for our nail. So what do you say we put it to the test and head up into Watcher's Spire and track down this final dreamer? Okay, so we're getting close to Lurien the Watcher, who is the last dreamer, and there's something of a boss fight required, so we're going to recharm for that, going with Shaman Stone, Soul Catcher, and Spell Twister. I'm a little undecided on the last two notches. Ultimately, I go with Grub Song and Nail Master's Glory. So one thing you might find interesting is this footage you're watching here. When I get to the actual boss encounter before the Dreamer, I die on this take. So what I did is I spliced in footage from my other save slot, which is a successful encounter. And I've been doing this all along, you know about it. That's not the interesting part. Rather, the reason I'm telling you is that in the footage of the successful encounter, there is a small change to my charm selection. Instead of using Grub Song, I use Dream Wielder, which is the one-notch charm that allows you to attack more quickly with the Dream Nail, and it also increases the amount of soul you get when you land attacks with the Dream Nail. So it's very subtle. You might not have noticed otherwise, but since we just had the charm screen open and you saw me equip them, I kind of felt like, in the interest of full disclosure, you know what I mean, that I should say something about that, because you're going to see in the boss encounter that I use some Dream Nails before it and then a little bit in the beginning of it. And, you know, it's obvious that I have Dream Wielder in. You can't attack with the Dream Nail that quickly otherwise. So I just wanted to disclose that in case you did notice. But otherwise, the rest of the charms are the same. Okay, and if you remember last time when we were scanning the map, there was only the one captive grub remaining, and that was it. We just rescued it. So all 46 grubs have been rescued, and it will be nice to return to the Grub Father and see all of them reunited in their home and get our rewards. All right, a close call, Devitron. Big time. Very hard fight. And as I mentioned on the other take, I actually died there. And I've died there plenty of times. It's just a really hard fight, one of the hardest in the game. And although there are 6 individual Watcher Knights, as a collective, the entire encounter is considered a boss fight. Okay, so the final Dreamer relinquished, and with it, all 3 seals on the Temple of the Black Egg are now broken. Now notice here a telescope. And again, this is Lurien the Watcher, and we're in the Watcher's Spire. So keep in mind that way up here in his tower, he had, something that you would watch with, an instrument of watching, a telescope. So as you can probably guess, I have a lot to say about Lurien the Watcher and the Dreamers and the theory crafting and all of that. But also, as you can probably guess, we're going to have to put it on hold. We're not going to just head right over to the Temple of the Black Egg and press on with the main story. Instead, we have a lot of loose ends to take care of and some more adventuring to do. So just put it all on hold for now, and we'll get to it shortly.
Bis manama boblis, bis boblis pera aklaba buktis, emin ba deprada, bab nanad, octis, ba, pura octis, manta, chokta ba nazura, mutta arba bis nachala, otopichura namen, o manta dublim, emin ba depra na papa nada octis, munta arma bis nachala, topechuro namen. Manta dublim, bis manama boblis pera aklaba buktis, emin ba deprada, bab nanad, octis, ba, pura octis, manta, chokta ba nazura, mutta arba bis nachala, otopichura namen, o manta dublim, emin ba deprada, papa nada octis, munta arba bis nachala, Pechuro namen, o manta dublim, bis manama boblis pera aklaba buktis, emin ba deprada, bab nanad, octis, ba, pura octis, manta, chokta ba nazura, mutta arba bis nachala, o topechuro namen, manta dublim, emin ba deprana papanada octis. Munta armabis jala. Dope churonam. Omanta duble.
Okay, so poor Bretta seems she finds herself captive audience to Zote the Mighty with his tall tales of heroism and accomplishment. But I guess some things will just never change. You know, what can you do with good old Zote the Mighty? As for us, we're heading over to the Grubfather to collect all our rewards and see all the grubs reunited in their lovely grub home. All right, so quite the joyful reunion. I love this part of the game and the playthrough, seeing all of them back together and happy. So in addition to nearly 2,000 Geo, which we desperately needed, we get a charm, Grubberfly's Elegy. And this is a pretty interesting charm. It costs 3 notches, and what it does is it transforms your melee attacks with the nail into short-distance range attacks. Okay, it causes these small white kind of beams or waves of energy to shoot out whenever you attack with the nail. So in addition to using your longer range spells like Shade Soul and whatnot, this allows you to stay at a distance, although a short distance, even with your nail attacks. So it sounds really great, right? But what's the catch? Well, the catch is it only works if you're at full health. All it takes is one errant hit, or you bump into a spike or something, and it no longer is working, and you have 3 wasted charm notches, at least until you heal back to full, right? So for that reason, I don't care to use it. So you'll notice here I equip Fragile Strength and nothing else. And we're going to go in this little side tent of the Grimm Troupe we've never been in. And this is the NPC who will transform your fragile charms into unbreakable versions of themselves.
Nasu Kimera. Oh. Haskasoti. Tapofese. I've already cast. Aber no sla?
And here you can see in our charm inventory unbreakable strength, and it no longer has the kind of glass globe icon around it. So this is now just a great charm. All right, so I'll try not to comment on Divine's method for transforming these fragile charms into unbreakable versions of themselves. I'll just settle for having the unbreakable strength with a pure nail, a fully upgraded nail, and that charm in there. Now nail attacks are just going to, hit like a truck. Okay, great. So now our nail attacks are going to do a lot of damage. So why didn't I equip our new charm and instead only equip Dream Wielder? Well, this is why. I just wanted to pop down into the crossroads and dream nail a few things really quickly and max out our soul. I'm going to need it for what's coming next. And what's next is we're going to go back and visit Grimm. You may have forgotten, it's been several episodes since we last gathered all the flames for him, which was the second round of flames, I believe. And we just never made it back here and turned them in. So now we're going to, and I've got Shaman Stone, Spell Twister, and Unbreakable Strength and Grub Song. And then I remember, oh yeah, I actually need Grimchild equipped in order to advance the quest. So I go with Grimchild, Unbreakable Strength, Shaman Stone, and Grub Song. Okay, so let's see what old Grimm has in store for us. All right, so quite a tough fight there with Troop Master Grimm, but a fun fight and a great reward, a bonus charm notch. So we're starting to have a lot of notches in the ability to, mix and match and have some really nice builds. And as usual, Grimm has sent us out to gather yet more flames, but I believe it's just 3 more, and then we can come back to him. And this time the Grimmkins are going to be Nightmare Grimmkins, okay? And they're actually very hard and very dangerous. So we'll be getting to the Grimmkins and the flames shortly, but not just yet. For now, we're going to switch gears, and we're actually going to start kind of a long, arduous quest line. People just refer to it as the Grey Mourner, and you'll understand more why once we get into it. So we have to go to the Queen's Gardens, and I'm going to do something of a map break to help explain this quest, so it'll become more clear when I do that. Okay, so here we are in the Queen's Gardens, and what we're doing here is, you notice this little break right here in this wall here, right here. There's a little room over here, and we've never been in it, and there's a grave in there. Now there is an NPC way over in the resting grounds called the Grey Mourner, and if you talk to it, it'll ask you to carry a flower from it all the way to this grave in the Queen's Gardens, okay? Now, the trick to doing this is you can't take any stags, you can't use your dream gate, no fast travel at all. You actually have to walk this flower all the way from the resting grounds to this grave in the Queen's Gardens, okay? And the other catch is you can't take any damage, even if you just accidentally bump into a spike or anything. If you take any damage at all, the flower is going to be destroyed and you fail the quest, okay? So what I like to do, and what a lot of people do, is they actually start at the end in the Queen's Gardens, and then they clear the path that they're going to take and kind of work their way backwards towards where the Grey Mourner is in the resting grounds. And then they take the quest once everything's already been cleared out on their way there, and it makes carrying the flower back to the Queen's Gardens much easier. Okay, so for now, let me just go ahead and trace out our path for you. And it's going to require 2 shots of the map because it's quite a long distance we have to cover. So, like I said, we're going to pop up here. I'll show you the grave, and then we're going to head this way and down and over and walk over to the Fog Canyon. And then from here, drop down into the Queen's Station, and then head right and up, and make our way into the infected crossroads, okay? Now for the next map. Okay, and picking up here where we were in the infected crossroads, we're just moving right, as if we're going to see Salubra, which we just passed there, and then into the Blue Lake, dash across and up into the resting grounds, and then over here we'll drop down into that catacombs area, and then come right over this way. And you notice here there's a little break in the pathway, and that's because there's this area up there we haven't been, and that's where we're going, and that's where the Grey Mourner is, okay? So this is the path we're going to take. We're going to clear all the enemies along this path, then talk to the Grey Mourner, get the quest, get the flower, and then we're going to just backtrack exactly the way we came, and all the enemies, most of them anyway, will be cleared out. And that way it'll make it easier to get back to the grave in the Queen's Gardens without taking any damage, and that way we'll have a better chance of successfully completing the quest. All right, I think you get the idea. It's pretty basic. The only other thing I want to add is with regards to how respawning works in this game, okay? If you kill all the enemies on a screen and then you leave that screen and then you come back, okay, all the enemies you killed will still be gone with two exceptions. The first is the little critters like the moss flies, the tick-ticks, just the little baby venge flies, just the little guys. Those always respawn no matter what. But the bigger, more dangerous ones will stay gone. The other exception is if you rest, okay? If you rest and then come back, then all the enemies will be there, even the big ones. So that's another wrinkle to this quest, is we can't rest once we've cleared the enemies. And here is the grave to which we need to carry the flower. And notice it read, "Here sleeps the trader's child." So this is likely the grave of the child of the trader lord, if you recall the Mantis trader who left Mantis Village and took up residence here in Queen's Gardens. So that would make sense as to why the grave is here. And it would also suggest that this trader's child and whoever this gray mourner is for whom we're going to carry this flower, they were likely in love or together in some otherwise meaningful or intimate relationship. Okay, as we make our way along and clear the path, I want to talk a little bit about the Dreamer, Lurien the Watcher, because we haven't had a moment to really get a word in edgewise since doing his encounter at the beginning of the episode. Now, as you know, as we've gone along and encountered these dreamers and learned more about the story and whatnot, I have posited this idea of a contingency plan that the dreamers may have had in place should anything go wrong with the Hollow Knight, as seems to be the case right now. And all of this has been corroborated by things we've learned from Bardoon, the White Lady, by the fact that we're supposed to take the place of the Hollow Knight ourselves, or at least we're supposed to have a choice to, and not to mention the behavior of NPCs like Quarrel with Monomon the Teacher, and Hornet with Hurrah the Beast. Now, speaking of Quarrel and Hornet, if I'm right about this external agent theory, who then is the external agent for Lurien the Watcher? Well, at first glance you might think the Watcher Knights, right? They're considered a boss fight, and they're certainly very tough and more than capable of testing the mettle of anybody coming along and trying to get up to Lurien and end his dream and him with it. However, I don't really buy the Watcher Knight argument. First of all, Monomon the Teacher had a boss protecting her too. Remember Umu? And the boss wasn't really the agent. It was just an obstacle, you know. It was actually Quarrel who was the agent who came along and helped us to defeat the boss. And second, I think it's going to be just much more nuanced than that. This guy lives up in a tower and he has a telescope, and he's called Lurien the Watcher. What is going on with all this, right? How can we make sense of it? Now, before I tell you what my guess is, I just want to let you know that this is the part where things start to get pretty stretched, at least in my theory. And some of that is a function of, you know, it's not a great theory or my lack of intelligence, but more of it, I think, is a function of how little Team Cherry has given us to go on, among other potential problems, right? So all that said, my guess is that the Collector is the agent of Lurien the Watcher. Now you remember the collector was the boss in the Tower of Love who was made all of void and who collected the grubs in the jars, among other things. And he also had the collector's map, which showed us the location of all the captive grubs in the world. Now, grubs are larvae, right? They are a version of an animal that is going to transform into another version of it, like a caterpillar to a butterfly, etc. And I think that the collector, by collecting all these grubs and placing them in glass jars, I think the idea is that he was trying to preserve this larval state and postpone the transformation until a later date. So how then does all this relate to Lurien the Watcher, right? Well, I think that the collector, like us and all the discarded vessels and like the Hollow Knight himself, etc., I think the collector is a creation of void created by the Pale King. And this was his job, right, to collect and preserve all the grubs. And I think that it was the Pale King's plan with Lurien the Watcher to have Lurien find all these grubs in the world so that the collector could go out and preserve them in the jars. Well, how did Lurien do this? Well, he has that big telescope, right? He's Lurien the Watcher. I think Lurien was able to sit up in his spire and look around this entire world and the kingdom of Hallownest and beyond, and be able to locate all of these grubs for the collector so that he could then go out and preserve them in the jars.
Go namane churo. To staccando.
Okay, so a nice moment of quiet and tranquility with our friend and fellow adventurer Quarrel. So getting back to Lurien and the collector and the grubs, it's all very far-fetched, but even if I'm right, what does it have to do with a contingency plan vis-a-vis a failing Hollow Knight and a spreading infection, etc.? Well, I think it's this. I think it's those grubs and whatever transformation they're going to make. I think it's going to be very important for the future of Hallownest. And accordingly, it needed to be postponed until a time like now when we've come along, and there's a possibility that this orange light plague infection can be defeated once and for all, and the transformed grubs will be safe.
Ketal sanalo. Nama lamehon.
Okay, so we've got the delicate flower. The way has been cleared. We're all ready to go. Notice that big entombed husk that we fought right here isn't there. Like I said, the big enemies will be gone. The little critters will respawn, but they're not as much of a threat, so it shouldn't be a big deal. So now you have my theory of Lurien the Watcher, as well as my theory of the Collector and the Grubs. And with regard to those latter two, the Collector and the Grubs, let me tell you, they have just sent the entire community into a tailspin trying to explain them. Now, as far as a tiny little piece of corroboration goes, again, this is stretched, but I think it's fair. If you remember when we were out in Kingdom's Edge and we met Bardoon, the big caterpillar, he told us that the Kingdom's Edge area was the resting place of the worm. But he also told us that it wasn't really a death, but rather a transformation, okay? And all the ash falling in that area is really just the worm's molt. Now, one little tidbit of lore, I don't think we've come across it, but maybe like when talking to the relic vendor or whatnot, but either way, just trust me, it's out there, is that the Pale King disappeared when this orange plague light infection showed up and started wreaking havoc. He disappeared, the White Palace just disappeared. As you saw, there are just ruins and rubble there now, and it's kind of a mystery. And what isn't known is whether he died or not. It was never officially recorded, you know, here lies the Pale King, and his body was there, and everybody just declared he was dead. That never happened. Rather, he just disappeared. So accordingly, if you combine what Bardoon said about worms, i.e. that they are creatures of transformation and that they never really die, with the fact that the Pale King just disappeared and nobody officially saw him die, then my guess is that these grubs are the Pale King, just come back as a transformed version of him, not to mention that the grubs, being larvae, are also creatures of transformation. Now, another small piece of corroborating evidence, albeit very stretched like the rest, so bear with me, is the fact that the Collector resided in the Tower of Love. And that tower was locked, right? Well, where did we find the key? The love key we found in the Queen's Gardens, and it was in fact guarded by 3 trader mantises, okay? 2 of them popped up before we got to the key, and then once we found it, a 3rd one popped out and tried to stop us as we were leaving. So if I'm right about the Collector and the grubs and all that, and if you can think of these trader mantises as agents of this orange light, if you will, because remember, they freely took the light into their minds. They accepted it and let it rule them. Well, then you could be damn sure that they would have a strong interest in keeping that Collector locked up in his tower so that he couldn't get out and preserve the grubs. And another benefit to keeping him locked up in that tower is that his map, which reveals the location of all the captive grubs, would be kept out of the wrong hands. So that's about all I have to say with regard to Lurien the Watcher, the Collector, the grubs, the dreamers, etc. At least for now, right? You know that I can always talk a little bit more. But really what I mean is, with regard to the lore and the information, you pretty much have it all at this point, you know, at least as much as the rest of us do. There are a few more things that I could show you, and a couple of them I do have planned that could kind of add to this discussion or augment it, maybe even corroborate it, we'll see. But that's pretty much it. And now you can see why a lot of us are kind of frustrated, because as much time and effort and theory that you put into this game, it does start to seem like maybe there's not really the whole story there, you know? We don't want the story spoon-fed to us, and we enjoy doing the work and uncovering these clues and kind of sewing it all together. But if it wasn't really there to begin with, and all we have is kind of a loose tapestry of some things that kind of just seemed cool at the time, that's going to be rough if that's the way it shakes out. Okay, so we successfully made it back without taking any damage, and you saw the spirit appear and kind of thank us with a bow or a nod, and it definitely did look kind of mantis-like. Now, as for our reward, we're going to return to the Grey Mourner later in the episode, but not right away. But the reward is really important. In fact, it's completely why you do it. Otherwise, it would be a total pain in the ass. The way I did it kind of made it look easy, and it's not exactly hard. But again, a lot of people just get really frustrated on that one. It's so easy to just have, one false step, and then you hit a spike, and then you fail the quest, right? Now, in case you were wondering, if you do take damage and you lose the flower, you can go back to the Grey Mourner and get another one, and in that way you can complete the quest. So it's not super harsh, death is final kind of mechanic. It's just basically a pain in the ass, and I'm glad that we got through it. All right, some nice professional platforming there, but we've been through all this before. Why would we come back here? If you recall, this is where Nailmaster Shio lives, and he taught us the Great Slash, but why on earth would we be back here now?
Ranjo Stenja.
Garo Enele?
All right, so some nice closure with the nailsmith there and his rather melodramatic fit at the end of last episode. It's nice to see that he's come around, calmed down, found a new purpose, and also for Nailmaster Shio that he can find some company and joy in what's left of his life. And meanwhile, we've dream-gated back to the City of Tears, and we're charming up here for what looks to be a boss fight, right? No utility charms in there. We've got Unbreakable Strength, Shaman Stone, Spell Twister, and I always kind of struggle on the last two. Do I use a 2-notch charm, or do I do 2 1-notch charms, right? So I go with Nailmaster's Glory and Grub Song. And what we're going to do is be heading way far out in the right to a little room in the Kingdom's Edge that we have never been to, and we're going to challenge the final Dream Warrior. Now you may notice out here on some of these ledges there are dead gladiators that have been tossed from the Colosseum of Fools. You can see a dead shielded fool there, a dead winged fool there, and you may have noticed those in the past, I don't know. Sometimes you even see them falling down before they hit one of those ledges. And I didn't want to say anything when we were here in the past because I didn't want to give away that there's an arena up there. You know, I wanted that to be kind of a cool surprise for you. So if you had noticed it, that's what it is. Now, one thing that I don't believe I get on camera, but it's kind of funny. It's sad, but it's kind of funny too. At some point, you do see Tiso, you know, the kind of adventurer bug that always complains about calm and peace and is just looking for a good fight. And he was so excited when we met him in the arena. Well, you see his body getting thrown down. So evidently, he didn't quite have what it takes, Devatron.
Mine.
Okay, let's watch our essence counter here. 1705. Bam, 1955. That's 250 essence for a Dream Warrior. And I think that's all the evidence you need to know that that is the toughest Dream Warrior encounter in the game. Not to mention, well, you saw the fight. I mean, he has a spinning dream shield. He has all these javelins that he throws at you. He flies around. Really, really hard. My strategy, as you saw, just blast him with spells and burn him down fast. But if that fight goes on any longer, you're not going to survive it. And as you probably could have guessed, now that we have more than 1,800 essence, we can return to the Seer and upgrade our Dream Nail. And it also means that we'll be able to enter the White Palace. So quite a touching end to a very grieving spirit. And for that, I really do like this quest. I like the closure. And with it, the final mask fragment of the game, allowing us to complete the final mask, which is called the Ancient Mask, along with our completed Soul Vessel and our fully upgraded Pure Nail. So our little guy is definitely tip-top, and he is a force to be reckoned with, Devatron. All right, we're coming up just shy of an hour, but like I said, I think this is the best place to stop the episode. We're going to take the stag to the hidden station, which is just outside of the White Palace, and that will enable us to start there and jump right into the action at the beginning of next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you're enjoying Hollow Knight. We'll see you in the next episode.